Welcome on into the All Aussie Rules Football Podcast. This is episode number 5 of 2026, and today we're going to be predicting every single match result for the 2026 AFL season. So we've got lots to get through. Make sure you've hit the follow button if you haven't already, or the subscribe, depending what platform you're on. Let's jump into the stuff that you're here for, which is the games. We will almost jump into them. Before we do, we'll just quickly have a little rundown of our pre-season podcast. So this is episode 5. You can see the 4 that are already out. We've gone best players, episode 1. Club list analysis in episode 2. Every team's best 23s in episode 3. Episode 4 was a tier list and expectations for every club. We're at episode 5. We're moving on later this week. We're now up to 2 episodes per week. We're going to have season predictions coming up on Friday. And then next week, we're doing match sim reviews. Make sure if you're watching the match sims, you jump on to any of our socials or here, in fact, and leave comments. Let me know your thoughts. We'll be going through comments of the week in every podcast episode, but I'd love to hear your match sim review notes. Then we've got a season preview on the 27th of Feb. Pre-season matches review on the 2nd of March, and then we have an opening round preview on the 5th of March, leading into opening round, which is exciting stuff. So all of that to come before the season officially kicks off with the podcast. This goes live on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts twice a week from now on, all the way through until the end of November. So plenty of content here. Make sure you hit that subscribe or follow button depending on your preferred platform, or on all platforms if you like. I won't say no to that as well. Also, while we're flogging out all of our content, over on the YouTube channel, if you're not already there, make sure you do hit that subscribe button. Go check it out. We've got pre-season previews for every single club going up in the month of February. We're halfway through, more than halfway through the teams, in fact. As of yesterday, the Hawthorn Hawks went out. We're going alphabetically, so every team up until then: Adelaide, Brisbane, Carlton, Collingwood, Essendon, Fremantle, Geelong, Gold Coast, GWS, and Hawthorn, all on the channel already. And by the end of next week, we're going to have every single team up. So Thursday the 26th, the 18th and final team on our season previews will go live. Some of these have gained some good traction. Jump on there, watch your team, let me know what you think. We go through history of the club, or recent history at least, all the ins and outs, depth chart, best 23, and also a little look at the fixture analysis for each club. So go check them out. Plenty of content all the way through February and March as we head towards AFL 2026. Now it's time to jump into the crux of this episode, which is predicting every single match. And this is how we're going to do it. We'll show all the match results up there. We won't talk about every single one, but we might briefly run through them. After 11 rounds, which is right before the mid-season buys, we'll have a little ladder update on how the teams are going at that point. I forgot to put a heading on the top of each one, but you get the gist of it. You know what it means. So we'll do a ladder update, and then we'll do the remaining rounds ladder update. We'll do a little rundown of how the finals would shape up if that was the case, if these results are the case. And then we'll round out the episode with comments of the week. Little disclaimer, I know, let me know all your thoughts. Don't hold back. I'm not saying don't let me know what you think. But just be aware. I mean, it's hard. I've gone through every game and I don't agree with all of it. Once we get to the final ladder, there's a few teams that only win a couple games, and I'm like, well, they're definitely going to win more than that. But this is how it shaped up. If I was to do footy tipping right now for the whole season, this is how I'd do it. Doing that, you're not going to go at a great rate. There's still a long time to go. There's still plenty of pre-season to go. There's injuries. There's a whole heap of factors that happen in the world. I've just put the results as I see them right now. Tried to take into account the matchup, how it goes historically, but at the same time, there's 200 and something games. So there is a lot. But yeah, be aware if your team does really poorly in this. In my opinion, doesn't necessarily mean I think they will do terribly this year. Um, it just means right now the way things are, yeah, that is how it is. So we'll go through it. We'll see how it shapes up. Make sure you jump in the comments and let me know your thoughts. And your comment might be highlighted in either of the next couple episodes of the podcast. Jumping into opening round, we're excited. Football's not that far away. We'll go through these ones. Sydney beating Carlton, Gold Coast beating Geelong, Hawthorn to upset GWS, Brisbane to beat Bulldogs, and I think St Kilda Collingwood will be probably the closest of the lot. I've got Collingwood just getting over the line. Round one's an exciting round. Obviously, that's when we finally get all the teams back. We kick off on Thursday night. I've gone Carlton to turn their form around from how they started last year when they got done by Richmond in round one. Hawthorn should be too good there. Bulldogs played good against GWS, so we'll go them. Geelong, Sydney, Collingwood, North Melbourne, St Kilda and Gold Coast all to get wins in round one. Collingwood Adelaide won, obviously a huge game Saturday night that I expect will be close. Sydney Brisbane is also a massive game. Both teams coming off opening rounds, but this is like a real big test early season for both teams. Obviously, Brisbane, the reigning back-to-back premiers, and Sydney, a team that had a rough season last year and looking to bounce back in 2026. Round two, we've gone Hawthorn, Adelaide, Gold Coast, GWS, Fremantle, Port Adelaide to beat Essendon, and West Coast in a nail-biter over North Melbourne. That one could go either way. Also on there, Hawthorn, Sydney, Thursday night will be a big one. Adelaide Bulldogs. Bulldogs struggled last year against teams that played finals, except for GWS. So we'll see how they shape up early this season because they've got a bit of a tough start, the Bulldogs. They play Brisbane opening round, then they play GWS, and then they play Adelaide. So by round two, all three matches that they've played are going to be against teams that played finals last year. So their season, we might find out quite a bit about this Bulldogs team quite early on this year. Richmond Gold Coast in Melbourne. Interesting to see if Richmond can replicate last year's result against Gold Coast. I think this one might be at the MCG off the top of my head. GWS St Kilda, big game. Important game for both teams. Round three, Geelong should be too strong for Adelaide based on what we saw last year between those two teams, but who knows. Collingwood GWS play Melbourne for the first time after in a few years. After the last couple years, the only times they've met being opening round. St Kilda Brisbane, big game there for Saints to make a statement. I've got St Kilda beating the Lions. Fremantle should be too good for Richmond. Essendon North Melbourne, that'll be an interesting game. I've got North Melbourne, but it could go either way, that one. Port Adelaide, West Coast, and Carlton Melbourne. So those last three games there, I have all six of those teams probably missing finals this year. But we'll see how that plays out. Round four, traditional Easter weekend football. We got Brisbane beating Collingwood. Carlton, too good for North Melbourne. Adelaide beating Freo. Richmond to get over the line against Port Adelaide in Melbourne. Sydney, too strong. Gold Coast, Bulldogs to beat Essendon. And Geelong just in a nail-biter against Hawthorn on Easter Monday. Round five should be Gather Round. Good matchups on Gather Round. We've got most of the games being pretty close. Adelaide-Carlton, I think Adelaide should win that. Then Collingwood-Fremantle should be an absolute ripper. Those two teams have played a lot of close games over the last couple of years. North Melbourne-Brisbane. Brisbane should be too strong there. Essendon-Melbourne. I've gone Essendon. They managed to beat Melbourne last year in Gather Round, so we're sticking with them. Gold Coast Sydney is a cracking game. That should be an absolute ripper on the Saturday. As will Hawthorn Bulldogs. That's another cracking matchup. Geelong should be way too strong for West Coast. GWS should be too strong for Richmond. And Port Adelaide St Kilda might be an okay finish to the weekend. Of course, Port Adelaide found form last year in Gather Round and beat Hawthorn. So some good matchups. We'll see how they all shape up. Obviously, the Thursday, Friday, Saturday games look really good, I think, on paper. Moving on to the next batch of results, round six. Collingwood Carlton, big game. Collingwood taking that one. Geelong beating Bulldogs. Bulldogs last year struggled against most top 8 teams. Sydney in the Battle of the Bridge. Gold Coast beating Essendon, pretty self-explanatory. Hawthorn too good for Port. Adelaide, St Kilda. That'll be a good game, I think. North Melbourne, Richmond. North Melbourne have to win that if they're legitimate, going to make anywhere near a finals run. Brisbane and then Fremantle in the Western Derby. Round 7, pretty simple. Bulldogs too good for Sydney. In Melbourne is the deciding factor there. Melbourne, Richmond could go either way, let's be honest. Hawthorn, Gold Coast. Hawthorn should win that one. Being Anzac Day down in Tassie, Hawthorn play down there really well. Collingwood to beat Essendon in the Anzac Day game. Geelong beating Port Adelaide. Freo winning St Kilda. Brisbane in a great game against Adelaide, hopefully. And GWS too strong. Round 8, moving on. We're going to try and speed it up. We're not going to. I said we weren't going to go through every single game, but so far we have. Hawthorn play really well against Collingwood. I've got them winning that one. Bulldogs, just because it's in Melbourne. I know Fremantle beat the Bulldogs in Melbourne last year, but I think the Bulldogs will bounce back. Adelaide should be too good in the what do they call this? The showdown. My brain is working great. Brisbane beating Essendon, West Coast. Richmond could go either way. Geelong, North Melbourne. Geelong smacked them last year. Carlton, St Kilda should go St Kilda's way if they're legitimately going to be making finals this year. Sydney to beat Melbourne, and Gold Coast GWS is a good finish to round 8, and I've gone Gold Coast at home. Round 9, Fremantle Hawthorn, great way to kick that round off. We're going Freo. Brisbane Carlton, Brisbane winning that. Bulldogs to win, Sydney to win, GWS, all those pretty self-explanatory. Gold Coast too strong for St Kilda, maybe at home. Geelong played pretty well against Collingwood. Melbourne, either way with West Coast, probably Melbourne too strong. And Adelaide to round out the round against Richmond. Round 10, Brisbane, Geelong. That's a grand final rematch, obviously not at the MCG. Up in Brisbane, could go either way. We'll see, learn a lot about both those teams there. I expect both teams to be well and truly in finals contention. Sydney to beat Collingwood in Sydney. Gold Coast, Adelaide, Hawthorn, Bulldogs, none of them too wild of a prediction. Fremantle too good for Essendon, I think. St Kilda too good for Richmond, and GWS should win. Round 11, a big one to start. Hawthorn Adelaide Thursday night down in Tassie. Hawthorn again in a close one. Essendon Richmond, Dreamtime. Essendon winning. Fremantle St Kilda, we're going Fremantle. Gold Coast to beat North Melbourne. Geelong over Sydney. Collingwood over West Coast. Port Adelaide over Carlton, maybe. Could go either way. GWS to beat Brisbane. And Bulldogs too strong for Melbourne. After round 11, every team has played 11 matches at this point, which is why we're doing this little update now, because buys start the week after. That would be how the ladder shapes up and approximate percentages. Hawthorn sitting on top, 9-2, but so are Geelong and Gold Coast, all three of them basically the same percentage according to these numbers. Obviously, it's not overly accurate, but it's just a good hint at where teams are. So those three teams, really good start. Brisbane, Sydney, 8-3, only one game off. Would also be really happy. All the way down to 11, all within 3 games. So Adelaide, Fremantle, Bulldogs, Collingwood, all with 7. And then GWS St Kilda with 6 wins at this point. And then a bit of a gap between before Port Adelaide, North Melbourne, Carlton, Essendon, Melbourne, West Coast, and Richmond, who are 1-10 at this point. Look, maybe I'm playing it safe. Maybe I'm not. I'm not 100% sure. But my theory is that last year, if you look at how the season shaped up, 9 teams were genuine finals chances throughout most of the season and fought. Then Sydney were a couple games back, and then you go back. It was a big gap from Sydney in 10th down to the rest. I don't really see too many of those rest of the teams making up much ground, other than maybe St Kilda. St Kilda are the big ones. So that's why there's still a gap, in my opinion, at the moment, from 11 to 12. I haven't seen enough from the rest yet to decide that they will be able to kind of bridge that gap. We'll see if that changes by the end of pre-season, but as it stands, that's how I've got it. So that's where it is. Some tantalising finals matchups there. Wait until you see how it rounds out, though, because trust me, there's some good good little first week of matchups in the finals if my plan, well, not my plan, but my suggested results come to fruition. Moving on, round 12, we're into bye rounds, the worst time of the year. We got St Kilda Hawthorn. I've got St Kilda winning that. That'll be a big game for them. In the context of their season, Geelong should be beating Carlton. Sydney winning Brisbane beating Freo. Bulldogs Collingwood. Bulldogs played reasonably well against Collingwood. GWS and Essendon beating West Coast, but genuinely that game could go either way. A lot of things will factor into that, and all games, but that one especially. Round 13, we've got Adelaide beating Geelong. I know Geelong did beat them last year, I think, in Adelaide, but this time we're having faith that that Adelaide can do it. Hawthorn beating the Bulldogs. That'll be a cracker. That will be a good game. North Melbourne Freo, obvious one who we're picking there. Gold Coast Brisbane, that is in WA as well, and the Hands Oval, the North Melbourne Freo game. Gold Coast beating Brisbane. West Coast losing to Port Adelaide. I nearly said that the wrong way around. Sydney should be too strong in Sydney. And Carlton Essendon. It'll be interesting to see how these two teams are travelling at that point, but I'd say Carlton probably. And Collingwood, Melbourne always play close games. No matter where they are on the ladder over the last 3 or 4 years, they've played a lot of close games, so I expect that one will be close. Bulldogs beating Adelaide, Geelong beating Gold Coast, Essendon over Melbourne, we'll see. North Melbourne, West Coast, another one that could go either way. Port Adelaide, Sydney, we're going Sydney. Brisbane beating Richmond, obviously, and St Kilda, I've got beating GWS. They played reasonably well against GWS last year, and I expect that they might put up a bit of a good fight again this time round. Moving on, round 15, we got Fremantle beating Geelong, Gold Coast Hawthorn. That will be a cracking game, maybe game of the round right there. Adelaide Melbourne, Adelaide should be too strong. GWS beating Carlton, Collingwood too good for Port Adelaide. Richmond North Melbourne could go either way. North Melbourne should be winning though, and St Kilda Bulldogs will be a good game to round out that round as well. I think, that one. And there's a few good games, let's be honest, that week. St Kilda, Bulldogs, we're going Bulldogs, but not comfortable either way. Round 16, we've got, obviously, I don't think from this point on we have the exact order of the fixture, so I genuinely hope that it's not going to be a Thursday night North Melbourne Essendon game, because that might be a tough watch. North Melbourne beating Essendon, though. Brisbane beating Sydney in Brisbane. Sydney did beat them up there last year, so we'll see how that plays out. Carlton too good for West Coast, surely, in Melbourne. Collingwood should beat Richmond. Hawthorn, GWS, that's generally a really good matchup. Obviously, a elimination final rematch of last year, but in Melbourne this time, we're going Hawthorn. Showdown, Adelaide too good, and Fremantle over in the West against Gold Coast. Rematch of last year's other elimination final. So both elimination final rematches happening on that same day. And that'll be interesting. Round 17, Gold Coast Collingwood. Gold Coast have had the wood over the last couple of years, so we'll see if they can continue that. We're expecting it to happen. GWS against Freo. Freo did beat the Giants last year not in Melbourne, but in GWS's home game. We'll see if they can do that again. Carlton, Richmond, we think Carlton probably win that. Sydney Bulldogs, Sydney maybe just. It'll be close, I reckon. St Kilda to beat Essendon. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Grand final rematch, Geelong-Brisbane. I think it's at GMHBA from memory. So not quite an exact grand final rematch, but should be a good game. Should be a cracker. They did play down at GMHBA last year, and it was a wild result with some poor kicking in front of goal from Geelong. Hawthorn, Melbourne. Hawthorn too strong, I think. Maybe. Should be, at least. Port Adelaide beating North Melbourne in a game that could go either way. North played a couple good games in South Australia last year from memory. West Coast should lose to Adelaide, you'd think, although they put up a reasonable fight in round 23 or round 24 last year when these two teams met over in the West. And West Coast put up a fight for most of that game. I think it was round 23. Moving on to round 18, we got 7 rounds to go. We kick off GWS beating Geelong at home, maybe. St Kilda, Port Adelaide. St Kilda should be too strong. Bulldogs beating West Coast. Brisbane should beat Essendon, although once again they put up an okay fight last year up at the Gabba. Carlton, Hawthorn should go the way of Hawks. Collingwood should beat North Melbourne, but I wouldn't put that in the books just yet. Melbourne beating Richmond, Adelaide beating Gold Coast, and Fremantle should beat Sydney. Round 19, I've got North Melbourne beating Melbourne. I think it's going to be a tough year for the Demons. I could be wrong. They seem a little bit confident internally, but I'm not convinced just yet. Gold Coast beating Bulldogs. Bulldogs struggled last year against top 8 teams, as we've said multiple times and we'll continue to say. Hawthorn beating Richmond. Pretty self-explanatory. Adelaide, Sydney, that should be a good game. I've got Sydney winning it. Collingwood, Carlton, always cinema, that one. Absolute cinema, as the meme goes. I've gone Collingwood. GWS beating Essendon in Melbourne. Not hugely confident, because Essendon do put up a reasonably good fight against GWS in Melbourne. Geelong beating St Kilda in a close one, just because it's in Geelong. Fremantle beating Port Adelaide, and Brisbane should be too good for West Coast. Round 20, St Kilda beating North Melbourne. GWS beating Sydney in the second battle of the bridge. Bulldogs beating Richmond. Brisbane beating Port Adelaide. Gold Coast should beat Carlton. Hawthorn should be too good for Essendon. Geelong winning, Adelaide beating Collingwood in Adelaide, but Collingwood do have a very good record at Adelaide Oval, so that one could go either way. Fremantle should be too strong for West Coast in the Western Derby. Round 21. Gold Coast beating Melbourne up there. Richmond beating West Coast. Could go either way. I reckon that'll be a close game. St Kilda beating Sydney. Carlton. I've got Carlton over Brisbane. One of the few upsets that I've really gone for here. I just feel like, yeah, it could happen. We'll see. It depends what sort of Carlton we get at this time of the year, of course. Collingwood losing to Geelong. Adelaide beating Essendon. Hawthorn beating North Melbourne. I think one might be down in Tassie. GWS beating Port Adelaide, and then a cracking game to round out that round. Fremantle to beat the Doggies over in the West. Round 22, we're getting close to the end. Giants, Gold Coast, Expansion Cup goes the way of the Giants. St Kilda beating Carlton. Doggies beating Roos. Sydney beating Power. Brisbane Hawthorn, cracking match up there in Brisbane, and we're going with Brisbane. Geelong winning. Fremantle winning, Adelaide getting the cake over Richmond, and then Collingwood should be too strong for West Coast, but strange things happen. Round 23, we go Geelong over North Melbourne. We go GWS over West Coast. St Kilda beating Richmond. Doggies beating Carlton. Brisbane beating Gold Coast in the Q Clash Part 2 of the year. Essendon, Sydney, we're going Sydney. Hawthorn, once again, they play really well against Collingwood. I'm backing that in. Port Adelaide over Melbourne, and Fremantle beating Adelaide. Final round, round 24. We got some good ones, some close games potentially in this round 24 that will have a massive bearing on the season potentially, just like last year's round 24. Hopefully we don't have a game coming up halfway through the next week like we did in 2025 due to the opening round fiasco of last year. But St Kilda, Gold Coast, that should be a cracking game. I've gone St Kilda in Victoria. Sydney should be too strong for North Melbourne. Carlton, Fremantle. I've gone Carlton in Melbourne, but depending what sort of Fremantle we get, they could be really good. They obviously won round 24 in Melbourne against the Bulldogs last year, so yeah, they did really well. Collingwood, Brisbane to round out the season for both those teams is a really good clash, and interesting to see how both of those two teams are faring at the time. There could be a lot of finals complications from that one. Essendon, Port Adelaide, probably neither team in genuine finals chances, but you never know by that point. Maybe one of them will be. I've gone Essendon over Port Adelaide. I think they beat them last year at Marvel Stadium early in the season. Geelong should beat Richmond. They met last year in round 24, and Geelong won it by about 30 or 40 points. Bulldogs should beat Melbourne. Adelaide, GWS. We've gone with Adelaide at home. They managed to beat the Giants last year at Adelaide by about 17. And then the final game is Hawthorn over in the West against West Coast. They should be too strong over there, you would have to think. That rounds out all the matches. And are you ready? Because here is the final 18 based on all of those results. 3, 2, 1. There it is. Hawthorn minor premiers. Wowee. Hawthorn Geelong, top two, both with 18 wins throughout the season. Then we head to Brisbane and Adelaide. So not too dissimilar of a top four from 2025. Obviously, Adelaide dropped 1 to 4. Geelong, Brisbane stay exactly the same, and Hawthorn go from 8th to 1st. Were they 8th? Or were they... I think they were 8th last year. But had a chance to be top 4 if they had won in their final round last year. So not too massive of a change from last year according to this, but if you take a look at it with 3 teams on 16 wins, Adelaide in 4th, Fremantle and Sydney in 5th and 6th, all very tight there. So that will be interesting to see how that plays out. Interestingly enough, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, all interstate teams, so non-Victorian teams. And then 8 and 9 also non-Victorian. So 16 wins does not get you top 4 again according to these numbers. Obviously, it's going to be a lot different to this, but this is how it shapes up for now in our thoughts. So where were we? 6 for Sydney, and then 15 wins will get you a top 10 spot at the moment, which is the play-in, which is crazy if that actually comes to fruition. Bulldogs 7, Gold Coast 8, GWS 9, St Kilda get into the top 10. Collingwood drop out from 4th on the ladder last year. They're the big droppers, down to 11th. The big movers, Bulldogs 9 to 7, Sydney 10th up to 6th. Fremantle finished 5th again. They were 5th or 6th last year. Gold Coast, GWS, not too dissimilar from last year. Collingwood missed finals with 13, and then a big gap down to 8 wins for Carlton, 7 for North Melbourne, 6 for Port Adelaide in 14th, 5 for the Bombers in 15th, 3 for Melbourne, which would be a disappointing year for them, and then Richmond, West Coast, 2 wins each. It's worth noting, I think a few of those teams in the middle will probably lose a couple games, and a couple of the teams from Carlton down to West Coast will all pick up maybe 1 or 2 wins. So I think it will be a little bit closer than this has come out, potentially. I've been sprouting most of the preseason that I think it's an 11-team battle at the moment for a top 10 spot, which is the 11 teams there. This is the first time in all of my predictions that Collingwood have actually come out not in the top 10. And they're in for an interesting season, there's no doubt about that. But I think there's genuinely 11 teams fighting for 10 spots. At the moment, a lot of things could change. Some of those teams could have massive injuries or just have some really unfortunate results where they lose multiple close games in a row that might just cost them. And teams might be informed from the bottom part of the ladder. But at the moment, that's how I see it. I don't think Carlton will be huge this year. I don't think North Melbourne are quite ready for a real finals tilt yet. We'll see how their pre-season and early season form manifests. Port Adelaide, they're in for an interesting season. I think their top-end talent is great. They just kind of lack depth at the moment, I think. And then we know Essendon's kind of rebuilding, so I don't expect them to get too massive amount of wins, probably 10 at most. Melbourne, they're kind of rebuilding as well. They're in for an interesting year. And Richmond and West Coast, we know that they're both in a rebuild at the moment. They'd both want more than 2 wins, no doubt about that. But we'll see how that plays out. If this was the case, we'd be having an interesting top 10. Remember, we get top 10 finals now. I know some people complain that wild cards are considered finals. They 100% should be considered a final, in my opinion. And I quite like that there's 10 teams. I think once we add in Tasmania and potentially a 20th team, we kind of wanted probably 10 finals teams anyway, so we've maybe jumped the gun a little bit, but that's okay. I think we were below the numbers before this year. Like 8 out of 18 is less than half the league making finals. I like it to be around about that half of the teams make it, so I'm quite happy with 10. This is how it would be. Starting at the top, wild card finals. would have Bulldogs St Kilda in Victoria, which would be a cracking game. I've gone Bulldogs to win that one. The other wildcard game would be the Expansion Cup. Not much longer can we call it the Expansion Cup, maybe, because obviously Tasmania will be joining the league. But Gold Coast, GWS, I've gone Gold Coast just because it's in the Gold Coast. On the Gold Coast. Which would mean that GWS, for the third year in a row, do not win a final, which they would be gutted if that is the case, which would lead to 2 elimination finals the next week. Fremantle would host Gold Coast in a rematch of last year's elimination final, which was an absolute cracker that Gold Coast won by a point late in that game. So we'll go with Fremantle this year to change that result. Sydney Bulldogs, a bit of history between these two teams. Elimination final, I've gone Bulldogs on the momentum of beating St Kilda the week before, going up to Sydney and taking that one. Qualifying final is a rematch of last year's semi-final, but in Melbourne this time, Hawthorn Adelaide. I've gone Hawthorn beating them. And the other qualifying final is a rematch of last year's grand final, last year's qualifying final. I think they've played 2024 prelim final. I think there's other prelims and qualifying finals that they've met each other as well over the recent 5 years. Geelong, Brisbane. This time, Geelong winning again in the qualifying final, just like they did in 2025. That would be an absolute cracker, though. Semi-final weekend would then lead to Adelaide hosting Fremantle. I'd be going Adelaide at home in that one, but I wouldn't write Fremantle off. But Adelaide certainly wouldn't want to go out in straight sets 2 years in a row. Brisbane hosting the Bulldogs. I think Brisbane would be too strong, but maybe the momentum of the Bulldogs riding that wave. Who knows? Lead to 2 preliminary finals, which would be interesting. Hawthorn hosting Brisbane, which could go either way. I went Hawthorn. I don't know. Maybe Brisbane should be the favourites in that, but I'm gone Hawthorn. And then Geelong hosting Adelaide. I think Geelong would be too strong, which would lead to a 2008 grand final rematch. Hawthorn hosting Geelong. Obviously, hosting is in air quotes because it's at the MCG. That would be a sellout grand final, without a doubt. It would be an absolute cracker. There'd be a little bit of feeling in it, I reckon. Hawthorn v Geelong. It would be an interesting match to see how that plays out, but yeah, I mean, I obviously was about 18 when they last met in a grand final, these two teams. So I have some fond memories of that sort of time and football at that stage. So it would be a fascinating watch. I've got Geelong winning it, but there's so much to happen. Who knows what will actually happen? This is just all hypothetical, obviously. And yeah, we'll see how it plays out. But that's what we've got. We're going to jump into some comments of the week. If you're new around here, well, this is actually a new little segment. From now on, throughout the rest of the season, my plan is at the end of each podcast episode to scour my comments through all the social medias, through YouTube comments, through Spotify, wherever. I'm going to try and go through them all and just highlight some of the comments and respond to them in podcast time. So here's 5 of them. I'll do them and then announce my comment of the week, I guess. So make sure you leave a comment on any of my videos, any of my content. Yeah, leave it all. I'll find the best ones and respond to them during the podcast. I appreciate all the comments, and yeah, we're going to continue doing this throughout the rest of the season. So first off, we had Hayden, who said, "Man, it has been too long without footy." That was on my Origin football recap, which was played last night. Fascinating, fun game. And yes, it has been too long without footy. And it was great to have it back. I'm really stoked that footy is back. But yeah, Origin was fun. It was fun. Merit for Butters, who says no. That's a fascinating comment that I think Merritt and Butters both say no. Probably Port Adelaide as well. I've got Butters rated higher than Merritt, in my opinion. I also don't think Butters wants to go to Essendon. Could be wrong on that. Maybe 12 months' time, things will change. I don't know if Merritt also wants to be shipped off to Adelaide, but it'll be interesting to see how that whole Merritt and Butters saga continues throughout 2026. Rob, every video I've seen so far on this subject leaves Sam Wicks out of the Swans side. Didn't watch much Swans last year. I think that's meant to be a question mark. He was a revelation in his switch down back. Will be one of the first chosen in the starting 18, let alone 23. So that was on my best 23s video or podcast episode, which was last week, was it? I don't know. I've lost count of weeks. No, 2 weeks ago, that one. Yep, I did leave him out of my best 23. He was first emergency, I think, from memory. Yep, they're pretty stacked down back, in my opinion. We'll see how it plays out. He probably will get games. I don't think he's, as you say, one of the first selected. I can certainly make arguments, though, for him to be in their best 23 and getting games. I would still have him in the low rungs of that best 23. They have much better ball users and defenders in that back 23, back 6. So if he was to be getting games, I'd probably still have him on the bench, in my opinion. Things can change. We'll see how preseason plays out for him, but yeah, that's my thoughts on that one. Brett Templeton, my club, the Bombers, should win 10 games. I truly believe we'll make the wildcard round. Go mighty Essendon Bombers. 10 games is unlikely to get you into the wildcard, in my opinion. I wouldn't be that shocked if the Bombers did win 10 games. I know I only had them winning 5 or something in this video. Most of my predictions have them winning less than 10. They won 6 games out of their first 12 or something last year. Like, they can win games of football. Injuries absolutely destroyed them last year. So 10 games, I wouldn't say is out of the question. But I very much doubt 10 games will be enough for wildcard. I would be very surprised if the wildcard teams didn't win minimum 12, but maybe 13 games. That's my thoughts. If it's less than 12, I would fall off my chair, I reckon. I'd be shocked. And comment of the week goes to Paul, who's put in a lot of effort. This was in last week's podcast episode where we did a tier list of teams. He's given plenty of thoughts, so let's quickly run through it. Thanks for sharing perspective on the season. You'll have to admit that you played it really safe. As I mentioned earlier this episode, yes, I probably did play it safe, but my explanation is the gap between the top 10 last year and the rest was pretty big. Will that happen again? Maybe not, but those bottom 8 teams have a long way to catch up, and that's my thoughts. That's where I sit at the moment. St Kilda have made an effort at bridging that gap. I think it might be successful, in my thoughts. I don't think the rest of the teams have shown enough to me yet to suggest that they're going to be bridging that gap. So things will play out how they do, but that's why I kind of played it the way I did. Might seem safe, but that's my thoughts. Made a few massive blues. I mean, we'll see. I could have made some stinkers, who knows. Football's funny sometimes. Paul's also provided his little tier list based on the tiers that I put in my video. So he's got top with Sydney. That's an interesting call. Not that shocking. Sydney are a very good team. Had a bad year last year, but certainly should be in finals contention this year. Gordon for Norm Smith. If Sydney finished top, Gordon for Brownlow might even be a play. Contenders, GWS surprise. I wouldn't be that surprised. I do have them dropping a little bit this year, and there's been a few injuries already for them this pre-season, so maybe they'll be a team that really struggles with the knowledge we have now, but I wouldn't be that shocked. Brisbane, the bar that nobody below can get over, probably. Their list is so good, they're scary. Top 4 challengers, Suns, Hawks, Dockers. One loses prelim, the other loses semi. Look, I think all 3 of them are genuine top 4 chances this year. Finals, Blues, they're his boulders. I'd be surprised to see it, but it wouldn't absolutely shock me. They still have a really good list. They can stay fit and healthy. Dogs, still can't defend. Their attacking is so good though, so they should play finals, you'd think. play-in final. I'm guessing wildcard final. Crows, shell-shocked. Cats, grand final loser, almost always drops out. Yes and no. Brisbane lost the grand final in 2023, came back and won the next two. So I wouldn't write Cats off. I would never write Cats off. The way they've been the last 15 years, I could never write them off. Outside chance, Pies, obviously no goals. Bombers, underestimate at your peril. And Port, if very lucky. As I've said about Port many times, I worry about their depth. Their top talent is great. I worry about their bottom 5 or 6 in their best 23, and then their depth outside of that as well. Tough year, Saints, ego implosion. Ooh, big call. Demons might be okay, can't tell. Roos, nothing will change without a defense. As I've also stated, I think they have the worst defense in the competition. Please win too. Tigers will get overrun each week. We'll see. They showed some good signs last year. If they can have a similar year to last year, I think that would be okay with their young guys. Eagles, they want more draft picks. Yes and no. They just have to win more than they did last year. They need more than one win. The only caveat is at least one team, usually two, will get smashed with injuries and drop 2 categories. Absolutely true. Allowing other team to replace them. 2025 Swans and Bombers. 24 Bombers and Eagles. My best guess for 26 is Pies and Cats. You can't really predict who's going to have injuries, other than the fact that apparently the Bombers have injuries every year, but hopefully not this year. Injuries will change our thoughts and opinions, obviously, on every team. Some teams have already been smacked in pre-season by injuries, so we'll see how that plays out. Cheers, that was fun. Rock on. Thank you, Paul, for that comment. That was comment of the week. And this was us predicting every single match of the 2026 AFL season. If you're new here, make sure you hit that subscribe or follow button. I appreciate you for being here. This was not a massive episode, but it was a lot of talking, a lot of games to get through. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Obviously, we've got multiple episodes coming up over the next couple of weeks. We've got our pre-season previews for every club over on the YouTube, Spotify and Apple Podcasts for all your podcast needs, as well as social medias, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, X/Twitter, all Aussie Rules everywhere. Go check it out. Give it a follow. Leave comments, all that sort of stuff. I appreciate you. I forgot to change the title on the back screen, but that doesn't matter. I'm John. This has been episode 5 of 2026. All Aussie Rules Football Podcast. We went through every match. We came up with a premiere from that. Let me know who you think will win it all. Have I made any absolute blues? Let me know in the comments below. I'm fascinated to find out. I'm excited for footy season. I cannot wait. Match simulation games start tomorrow at time of recording today. If you're watching this when it goes out, Geelong Hawthorn Monday afternoon. I'm really looking forward to that. Thanks for tuning in. I'm John, as I said. We'll be back on Friday with another podcast episode, and go check out the YouTube for all your preseason previews. Catch us on the next one.